Welcome to the episode 8 of the G2 on 5G, the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel and Baby Yoda. How's Baby Yoda doing today?
He's pretty good. He's chilling over there behind me so that he's not disrupting the podcast while we're talking about 5G.
Good,
I think he
excellent.
kind of exists in a different G.
A different realm, the Mandalorian realm. So, well, let's get started. My first topic this week is the T-Mobile outage. I was resetting my phone. I've got 2 friends that have T-Mobile service, and I think you clued me into it. It's unfortunate. This happens from time to time. It affects all carriers. But the FCC Chairman, Pai, came out on Twitter, and it's not the official FCC, endorsement, but he came out and was, calling for an investigation. I just think he's dead wrong. I mean, I don't want to call the chairman, ignorant, but these sort of things happen all the time. And given COVID-19 and just the pressure on these cellular networks, I mean, it's not T-Mobile's fault from my perspective. I mean, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think T-Mobile did a really good job of owning up what the issue was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Lots of communication on Twitter from Neville
100%. I think it would have been better if there was no outage and it wasn't 12 hours. I'm a T-Mobile customer, so obviously it affected me significantly. I didn't fully lose connectivity; it kind of just lagged for me. But the problem was that Ajit Pai, decided to say there would be an investigation when that's never been the case before for any other outages that have happened before from other carriers, and they happen from time to time. And it's unfortunate nobody's happy about it, but it's happened to everybody else. So it seemed a little bit of a stretch, and I think T-Mobile owned up to the issue very quickly and pointed out what the problem was, and I think moved along pretty quickly. And communication and action and doing like the thing that needs to be fixed, and fixing the problem that caused it, ultimately, I think most people are going to forget about it. Now, if this becomes a repeated issue, then that might be something worth discussing, maybe worth something investigating. But if this is a one-off issue, I don't really see why it needed to be investigated to begin with.
No, I agree. And I think, unfortunately, we're seeing overcorrections. I think people are on pins and needles given COVID-19 and obviously what's going on right now with, the news and, and the media and social unrest. And I just think maybe this was just sort of a knee jerk, but like you said, I mean, this affects all carriers. It happens from time to time. And to your point, I mean, if it continues, that's a concern. But, I think T-Mobile did a great job. They were very vocal on social media. Neville himself was giving updates, it seemed like almost every other hour.
Yeah.
So we got to give them a little bit of credit there and move on. So
and I don't think I've ever seen any other operator, not only, I mean, they've solved problems, but I don't think they've ever been so transparent about what caused the issue and how they're going to fix it. I don't think I recall AT&T or Verizon ever doing that when they had an outage. So admittedly they had a longer outage than usual, but yeah, I just very weird situation.
Yeah, definitely was. Well, let's move on. So you've got some news to share about Qualcomm.
Yeah, so it's kind of Qualcomm related. I mean, the reality is they did launch 2 new chipsets, kind of in the last week or so. The 2 chipsets are the Snapdragon 690, which is a 5G chipset for kind of mid-tier phones. So you can get a 5G phone for under $500 that still has 5G connectivity. Some people harped on the fact that it doesn't have millimeter wave support, but if you look at millimeter wave and the cost of millimeter wave, it doesn't fit the cost profile of those lower end devices, and the markets where they're going don't have millimeter wave yet. So it doesn't really make much sense for a lot of reasons. But to kind of counter that, they also launched the Lenovo 5G PC with Verizon, which is available today, which is the 18th. I think that, well, actually we're recording a day ahead, but The 18th is when it's available. So it has millimeter wave and sub-6, so it does both. So that doesn't really fit into a lot of the narratives that millimeter wave is an issue or it's dying, because the 690 doesn't have it. And on top of that, and on top of having a phone and a PC 5G device, they also launched a 5G robotics platform called the RB5, which is designed for robots like in home, in factories, security, all kinds of robots, drones. And this platform, the RB5, utilizes kind of a modified version of the 865 chip for robotics. So it's got a lot of similar parts, but it's also got special parts for robotics.
Yeah.
Still very fast, lots of AI, but it also has the ability to connect to a 5G modem and get 5G connectivity, which is a big deal because there are robots out there that need connectivity. And it's really cool and interesting that Qualcomm is doing 5G in smartphones, PCs, and robots. So I thought that was a very interesting kind of, in the same week, they're kind of showing the breadth of what 5G can do.
Right, and and this is part of their strategy. We've talked about this before. I attended 5G Summit in Barcelona last year, and Qualcomm was very adamant about their roadmap supporting low-end devices, mid, kind of the mid part of the market, and high-end devices. And to your point, millimeter wave. I mean, that's going to be reserved for very, very high-end smartphones. So this fits within any product marketing strategy. You're going to want to have a bifurcation of features at different price points. So I agree with you. I think the great news is that they're serving all of the different users. And
the interesting thing is the 690 has an X51 modem, which is the third tier of 5G modems from Qualcomm. Because you've got the 55, 52, and 51. So now they have 3 different tiers of 5G modems. So they're clearly building out a very broad spectrum of capabilities when it comes to 5G, because the X51 has a peak download speed of 660 megabits per second. So it's nowhere near the top end on the X55.
Sure. Yeah. Again, covering all those price points. So well, let's shift to my second topic, and it's around the GSMA's cancellation of Mobile World Congress Americas in Los Angeles in October. And not surprising to hear this, lots of events are going virtual. I really felt, that this was going to be really the coming out for the retooled CTIA event. And I was actually surprised that they weren't shifting this to a virtual event. I think had they done that, it could have really cemented its relevance. As you remember, Mobile World Congress Barcelona, the flagship show, was caught in the lurch. That's really when COVID was hitting,
it was
like
kinda,
gangbusters, right? And I was actually in Barcelona. Yeah,
it went down as COVID went up. It kind of
exactly, yeah. And I was actually flying back from Barcelona, had a few meetings, and then I got my butt back to the U.S. But I really, I think the GSMA really kind of missed the mark. I know that they've scheduled a virtual event to replace the Mobile World Congress Shanghai event that occurs every year, but I was really surprised that they didn't step up and turn this into a virtual event.
I think part of the reason why was because Ericsson made an announcement they weren't going to attend again, just like they did with Mobile World Congress. And I think once they're out, they're such a big entity and such an influential one, and they take up so much space that if they're not willing to take the risk, I think a lot of other vendors are not interested in attending or taking the risk. So
or the economics don't work, right?
Yeah, and I just think that it's still too soon. That said, you do have IFA saying that they're going to hold their event in Berlin in September. I'm not sure how that's going to work out because you're going to have to quarantine people who are visiting from out of country, and that's just confusing to me. Unless you test everybody, but it's just odd. I just don't feel like physical shows really make any sense this year at all.
I don't think so either, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with CES. I got some preliminary news that it'll be a smaller show. It'll be a lot of virtual tracks, which is not surprising. But I agree with you. I think for this year, we need to put COVID in the rearview mirror, and virtual events are working well. Like this week, I attended a Cisco event. It was very, very well executed. So we'll see. Well, let's shift to your second topic, and it's Nokia. And it's no surprise they've had some challenges on their roadmap from the silicon perspective. And so
Yep.
you wanted to share some news around a new announcement.
Yeah. So they have decided to tap Broadcom as a partner for their 5G chipsets. They're having Broadcom help them develop custom chipsets for 5G infrastructure. And this is kind of a way for them to address some of their slipping on their own silicon silicon roadmap, and kind of maybe speed up and possibly catch up to the competition. Do you have any input on that?
I agree. I attended their analyst forum at their home base there last year, and their CEO was very, very transparent about that they've had some misses on the roadmap. Reef Shark is actually the chipset family that's it's Nokia's branding for that. And so I think this is positive. I mean, there have been some prior announcements with other partners as well. I believe Marvell. So I think Broadcom. I mean, obviously they've got great capabilities. Tend to focus on very high volume sort of merchant silicon solutions. So I think this should help really Nokia shore up its silicon misses in the roadmap.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what I have a feeling about too.
Yeah, cool. My third topic this week, very interesting. So as the U.S. continues to push against China and Huawei in particular, there was news this week that the U.S. is actually offering incentives to Brazil, actually a family there, and to incentivize them to not deploy Chinese infrastructure and focus on traditional infrastructure from Nokia, from Ericsson,
Right.
from Samsung, and the likes. And I don't know. I mean, do you think this is too bold of a move, too extreme of a move on the U.S.'s part?
So I think it's definitely an aggressive move.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really comes down to whether or not you think the U.S. government wants to, one, have political influence in that country, and two, consider that country a close ally.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that if you want to be able to share intel and communicate with a partner, you want to ensure that you trust their networks. And I have a feeling that this is kind of a way of bringing the U.S. closer to Brazil and possibly pulling Brazil further away from the reach of China. Because the reality is, China is one of Brazil's largest trading partners, if not the largest.
Yeah.
And, Huawei obviously has been a big part of that. So I think that this is kind of a way to politically draw Brazil further from China and more towards the U.S. Even though, to be fair, I think the U.S. has kind of neglected Brazil for maybe the last decade. So I think that's kind of something to consider. Is this maybe once again more of a political move than anything?
Yeah, and I think it's trade oriented as well, right? So as the U.S. pivots away from China, Brazil historically has been very protectionist, very high tariffs, very expensive to do business if you want to put manufacturing within the country as well. It's just been a political philosophy for many years. Again, I know it because I have family in Sao Paulo and Rio and other cities, throughout Brazil. So I think this might also be, an opportunity for them to build, trade relations. And, there's been a lot of talk around, hey, with the U.S. pivoting away from China, what are some other countries? India has been discussed. There are challenges in India with power grid, natural resources to support, manufacturing and that sort of thing. Brazil and its industrialized cities has, improved, infrastructure to support that. So it's interesting. It's just sort of my hypothesis there, but time will tell for sure. So, well, let's shift to your third topic this week, and it's around Ericsson. We've been talking about Ericsson. And they published a mobility report. And why don't you kind of give us an overview of what you found insightful there?
Sure. So they do this mobility report at least once a year. It might even be twice a year, or even 3 times a year. I lose track because there's so many of them.
Sure.
But they're actually very insightful documents that are very rich in data and projections. And one of the big things that Ericsson has focused on with their mobility report is 5G, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And the most recent 5G report says that they expect about 190 million subs, 5G subs,
Mm-hmm.
by the end of the year, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But if you consider that 5G is now kind of a global thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's in over 100 countries, I believe, at this point,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not a stretch to think that, okay, maybe China will end the year with maybe 50 million or 100 million. And then, the US could probably have 20 to 30 million. And that doesn't actually sound like an outrageous number anymore.
Right.
Um, but yeah, almost 200 million users on 5G in what was supposed to be the first year is not bad.
Right.
Technically 5G launched 2019,
Mm-hmm.
but there were basically no devices, maybe one or two. It wasn't a real launch.
Right.
It was kind of like a pre-rollout. So
Mm-hmm.
2020 is really the first year of 5G, first full year of 5G, and yeah, it looks like could be a really good year. Even though they mentioned the first 5 pages of the report are all about COVID, and
Mm-hmm.
basically all of their analyses were that while COVID is impacting the ability of users to access the network or
Mm-hmm.
travel and use it, the reality is people are also using the network more, so it's kind of a wash based on economic slowdown, consumption up. So total and it's like things that haven't really changed much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and cellular data growth in general is kind of on pace to what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So basically 5G is kind of, going the pace that it should be. And it's going to be quite big for the first year or two, just because they're, go from 0 to 190 million. It's pretty significant. But the transition is going to be pretty big for operators and users. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if you've seen the report yet, but do you have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, no, I took a look at it, but you make an excellent point. So, we basically had no 5G enabled devices in 2019. So, actually, from my perspective, to see this number and their prediction, ending this year with nearly 200 million devices, to me, I feel like, we're ahead, of what we thought, where we thought we would be. So, yeah. That's I think it bodes well just for the deployment in general moving forward. So, hey, so with that, another great session, Anshel, this week with you and Baby Yoda. Why don't you take it away?
Sure. We hope that our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If you have any ideas or would like to have us cover something in a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sog on Twitter. And we hope that you guys have a great weekend, and please tune again in next week.